You are standing in the middle of a battlefield, but the enemies surrounding you aren't strangers. They wear the faces of your oldest habits. They look like the comfortable stories you've told yourself since childhood about why you can't change. You are terrified of destroying them because without them, you don't know who you are. So you freeze. You build an elaborate, noble-sounding excuse to drop your weapons and walk away from the very transformation you desperately need. But the only way out of this crushing paralysis is to finally admit that your own solutions are failing and to ask a deeper part of yourself for the way forward.
Wow. Yeah, it is a truly terrifying realization.
Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. I am incredibly thrilled you're taking the time to join us for this. We are taking on something absolutely massive today. We are unpacking the foundational concepts of, well, one of the most famous, most revered texts in human history, the Bhagavad Gita. But we need to set the ground rules right away. Our mission today is not to treat this like some dusty, ancient artifact sitting behind glass in a museum. We are not doing a dry historical review. We are going to decode the Gita as a deeply personal, remarkably practical map for overcoming life's ultimate paralysis and finding permanent happiness.
Exactly. And the sources we're using to do that are just fantastic.
Yeah, we are pulling from an incredibly rich stack today. We have extensive transcripts from a masterful summary lecture by Swami Sarvapriyananda, who has this amazing ability to make ancient philosophy profoundly accessible. We're also layering in detailed textual analyses from centuries-old commentaries, like Sri Madhvacharya's Gita Pasha and the works of Sri Samatindra Tirtha.
Those traditional commentaries are so vital for getting past the surface level.
They really are, and to ground all of this heavy philosophy, we have a profoundly moving set of personal reflections from a modern practitioner who uses the Gita day in and day out to navigate their own inner turmoil. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because looking at these sources, I am just struck by how we have 1,500 years of academic analysis pointing toward a problem that feels like it was written about someone sitting in traffic this morning.
I completely agree. What is absolutely fascinating here is how these sources, when you synthesize them, manage to strip away centuries of historical, cultural, and mythological baggage. They reveal a psychological framework that perfectly describes the human condition today.
Right.
The core problem this ancient text addresses is the problem of internal division. It's that universal struggle of knowing what we ought to do, but lacking the inner harmony to actually execute it. We're essentially looking at a manual for the divided mind.
And before we even get to the famous battlefield, before we even talk about the iconic characters of Krishna and Arjuna, our sources ask us to take a massive step back. They ask us to look at our own fundamental motivations. Swami Sarvapriyananda starts his lecture with a question that feels almost too big to answer.
Why are we really here?
Yeah. What is the core driver behind literally everything we do every single day?
It is the ultimate diagnostic question. The lecture points out that whether you are conscious of it or not, every single human action, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you fall asleep, is driven by a singular underlying desire.
Which is what?
We are all trying to attain happiness and overcome suffering. That is the engine of the human experience. Even the most seemingly selfless acts or the most destructive acts are fundamentally attempts to move away from pain and towards some form of satisfaction.
So we are all just constantly chasing happiness. But the texts categorize the ways we normally go about this chase, right? Because clearly, buying a new pair of shoes and seeking spiritual enlightenment are two very different approaches to finding happiness.
Right, they are.
Yeah.
How do the foundational commentators break this down?
Well, they categorize our ordinary, everyday pursuits into three distinct buckets.
3 buckets.
The first bucket is called kama. This translates roughly to pleasure, specifically immediate sensory gratification.
So like a quick fix.
Exactly. Think of this as the pursuit of a quick burst of feeling good. You hit a mid-afternoon slump at work, you feel a little stressed, so you go to the kitchen and eat a warm chocolate chip cookie. Or you're feeling lonely, so you spend an hour scrolling on your phone for a hit of dopamine.
Yeah, it is the desire to manipulate your immediate environment to produce a pleasant sensation right now.
And that is basically the entirety of modern consumer culture. We are constantly optimizing for kama.
We really are.
But the problem with the cookie or the social media feed is that the feeling fades the second you finish. You can't just string together cookies for 80 years and call it a deeply satisfying life.
No, you definitely can't.
You eventually realize you need something more stable.
Which brings us to the second bucket of human pursuit, which the texts call artha.
Artha. Okay, what does that cover?
If kama is the quick hit, artha is the structural pursuit. It literally translates to wealth, But in a much wider philosophical sense, it encompasses worldly power, achievement, status, and security.
Ah, so it's the classic arrival fallacy.
Exactly. We tell ourselves, the cookie was nice, but if I really want to permanently stop suffering, I need to not worry about paying my rent. I need a better job. I need to climb the corporate ladder. I need recognition, name, and fame.
Oh man, the treadmill of Artha. I know that one intimately. It's that voice saying, if I just get this promotion, if I just hit this subscriber count, if I just buy the house in the right neighborhood, then I can finally relax. Then the anxiety will stop.
Right. We spend decades, sometimes our entire adult lives, optimizing our reality for Artha. And we celebrate it. Society completely rewards the pursuit of Artha.
It's basically the American dream, right?
Exactly. But the texts introduce a third ordinary pursuit, which often masks itself as something higher, but is actually part of the same mundane cycle. This third bucket is Dharma.
Now, Dharma has a lot of profound meanings in Eastern philosophy, right?
It does, but in this specific context of ordinary human desires, it refers to doing good, acting with morality, decency, and religious observance.
It sounds noble, though. Being a good person, following the rules, helping your neighbor. Why is that grouped in with chasing money and cookies?
Because of the underlying motivation. The traditional framework asks why ordinary people are doing this. Often, it is fundamentally a transaction. It is an attempt to generate good karma.
Like a cosmic point system.
Exactly. We think if I'm a good person, if I do my duty, if I follow the rules and suffer quietly, the universe owes me a reward. And what is the reward we secretly want for our good behavior?
More karma and more Artha.
Precisely. We want more pleasure and more security. We think our morality is a currency we can use to purchase better external circumstances.
Wow.
We are still trying to extract happiness from the world. We are just using a different strategy. We are trying to hack the universe's algorithm by being good.
That is a piercing insight. I think a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling of indignation when something bad happens to them, and their first thought is, but I'm a good person, I don't deserve this.
Yes, it reveals that we view our morality as a protective shield against suffering.
But Swami Sarvapriyananda points out the harsh reality that triggers the beginning of true spiritual inquiry. And that reality is that kama, artha, and dharma are ultimately insufficient for permanent happiness.
They are completely insufficient. You can have all the sensory pleasure, all the money, and all the social credit in the world, and you will still suffer. You will still experience anxiety, grief, and that creeping sense of emptiness.
And that terrifying realization brings us to the true subject of the Bhagavad Gita, which is moksha.
Moksha, the ultimate liberation.
So how does moksha differ from just being really, really successful at artha?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes the entire paradigm of how we view our pain. We constantly, endlessly misdiagnose our own suffering. We think we are unhappy because we lack money, or a partner, or fame. Because we believe the root of our pain is external, we spend all our energy constantly adjusting our external world.
Like if I just divorce this person, or if I just move to a new city, or change careers, then I'll be happy.
Exactly. The Gita posits that spirituality, true, deep, transformative inquiry, only begins when we finally hit a wall. It begins when you have arranged the external furniture of your life perfectly. You have the job, the house, the family, and you sit down on your perfectly purchased couch and realize, I am still miserable.
Because the external adjustments aren't working.
Right, because the source of the suffering is internal. Moksha is the promise that there is a state where you can permanently overcome suffering, not by changing the world, but by realizing the true nature of the mind observing the world.
Hitting the wall isn't the end of the road. It's the starting line. But before we cross that starting line, the sources make it very clear we need to clear up some major misconceptions about what the Gita actually is. In the modern wellness and productivity space, ancient texts constantly get repackaged into things they were never meant to be.
Oh, absolutely. The modern appetite for optimization tends to consume everything, including sacred texts. Swami Sarvapriyananda is highly enthusiastic about explaining what the text is not.
What are some of those things?
Well, you will frequently see people giving talks on the Gita for business management or leadership lessons from Krishna. And while it is true that a clear mind makes for good business decisions, the text is not a management seminar for climbing the corporate ladder.
It is not going to promise you a corner office.
No, it is not.
Right. And it mentions food in moderation, but it's not a diet book. It mentions the body, but it's not an exercise manual. And most importantly, and this is the big one given the actual plot of the book, despite its setting on a literal battlefield, it is absolutely categorically not a manual for warfare.
Western interpretations often get incredibly tangled up here. Scholars often fixate on the war aspect. They ask, why would a text about profound spiritual enlightenment be delivered by the divine to a warrior just moments before a massive, bloody battle?
That is a fair question on the surface.
It is. But Swami points out that this fixation is often a cultural projection. It is a reflection of the deep-seated trauma of the Western mind over the last century regarding industrial-scale warfare. We view the imagery of armies and chariots strictly through the literal lens of war and peace.
But the traditional commentators don't read it that way at all, do they?
Not at all. If you look at the foundational Indian scholars, figures like Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, who've been analyzing this text for over 1,500 years, none of them focus on the warfare as a literal prescription. It is entirely seen as symbolic.
The war is the ultimate pressure cooker.
Exactly. It is the extreme life-or-death scenario needed to force the most profound philosophical questions to the surface. Think of Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh,
He is the global icon of nonviolent resistance. Yet he used the Bhagavad Gita as his primary source of daily inspiration. He read it every single morning. He didn't read it as a call to arms against the British. He read it as a call to internal mastery.
he used a book set on a battlefield to free a nation without firing a single bullet.
Exactly. That contrast alone proves the point. We are not talking about physical swords and shields.
And to help us understand how to digest this philosophy, there's this beautiful ancient analogy in the sources.
Yes, I love this one.
They say, imagine the Upanishads, which are the dense, mystical, incredibly complex root texts of Hindu philosophy. Imagine them as a herd of milk cows. Krishna, the divine teacher, is the milkman. Arjuna, the student, is the thirsty calf. And the Gita itself is the milk.
It is a brilliant metaphor for accessibility. The raw philosophy of the Upanishads can be incredibly difficult to penetrate. It requires immense study. But the Gita takes these profound concepts and distills them into something nourishing, digestible, and practical.
It makes it accessible for everyone.
Right. The text actually refers to itself as a royal road. It's not a narrow, treacherous mountain path that only a few elite ascetics living in a cave can climb. It's a massive, multi-lane freeway designed for anyone, a parent, a student, a worker, to travel on.
It harmonizes all these different paths into one cohesive framework. But to truly understand how this milk is delivered to the calf, to understand how this royal road is paved, we have to look at the stage that is set. We have to look at the war within.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the physical context of the Gita. It's a small section of a much larger epic called the Mahabharata. What is the basic setup here?
Boiled down to its essence, it is a catastrophic civil war between two sets of cousins. On one side, you have the Pandavas, led by 5 brothers, including our main character, Arjuna.
And they're the good guys.
They are. They are the rightful heirs to the kingdom. They are characterized by their adherence to virtue, but they have been cheated, tortured, and exiled for years.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have the Kauravas, led by the arrogant, power-hungry Duryodhana. They are the usurpers. After years of failed diplomacy and broken promises, the two massive armies are finally gathered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra to settle it once and for all.
But the way the story is framed in the opening chapter is such a fascinating narrative device. We aren't just dropped into the middle of the soldiers. The entire scene is being observed remotely.
Right.
Back in the capital city, far from the front lines, sits the old king, Dhritarashtra. He is the father of the corrupt Kauravas, and crucially, he is physically blind. He is sitting in his palace, incredibly anxious about the war, and he asks his trusted aide, Sanjaya, for an update.
And Sanjaya is uniquely equipped to provide this update because he has been granted a special temporary boon, a kind of divine vision. Swami Sarvapriyananda humorously compares it to CNN-style breaking news vision.
Well, that's perfect.
Sanjaya can see and hear everything happening on the battlefield miles away, and he reports it live to the blind king.
So the very first verse of the Gita, the opening line of the whole text, is the blind king asking Sanjaya for this live update. He says, Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra. What did my people and the Pandavas do?
He's asking what's happening on the physical battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Right, but he uses a very specific, strange phrase. He calls it Dharmakshetra, the field of righteousness or the field of Dharma.
And this is where the commentators like Sri Madhvacharya insist we look beneath the surface. Why call a place of impending mass slaughter the field of righteousness?
It seems like a contradiction.
It does. But this is our first major clue that the text operates on multiple levels. The blind king, Dhritarashtra, represents the human mind when it is blind to the actual facts of life.
Blinded by what?
Blinded by his inordinate, irrational attachment to his corrupt children. He knows his sons are evil, he knows they're in the wrong, but his ego and his attachment prevent him from seeing clearly or acting justly. He represents the mind clouded by selfish desires.
That makes so much sense.
Therefore, the theater of war, Kurukshetra, is not just a geographical location in ancient India. It is the human body itself. It is the life we live every single day.
And the two opposing armies.
They represent the angelic and demonic forces, the positive and negative tendencies that live inside every single one of us. The Gita is a live broadcast of the interaction between the higher self and the lower ego within you, right now.
Which brings us directly to that incredible personal reflection from our sources. This modern practitioner wrote something that just stopped me in my tracks. They said, "When I read the Bhagavad Gita, I do not only see characters, I see myself. I am Arjuna. I am also Duryodhana."
That is so powerful.
It is. They go on to say, "On my good days, I am Arjuna, humble, calm, seeking truth. On my bad days, I am Duryodhana, egoistic, restless, angry, comparing myself with the world. Both live inside me. There is a constant war in my heart."
That is the essence of it right there.
I mean, if you are listening to this right now, think about your own mind today, just over the last 24 hours. Haven't you been both? Haven't you had a moment of pure clarity where you wanted to be generous, patient, and kind, followed an hour later by a moment of petty jealousy, unreasonable anger, or deep insecurity? Every single human being is fighting this unseen battle.
It is the defining feature of the human condition. And to navigate this internal battlefield, the ancient Upanishadic tradition provides one of the most stunning and enduring metaphors in world philosophy.
Yes, let's talk about the chariot metaphor. It is referenced throughout the commentaries we are analyzing. Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you to visualize this image because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
It really sticks with you.
Arjuna is a great warrior, and he rides into battle on this magnificent chariot pulled by powerful horses. His charioteer, his driver, is Krishna, who represents the divine or the supreme intellect. But this entire image is a structural map of your own psychology. How do the sources break down the parts of this chariot?
Let's map it out part by part. The physical chariot itself represents your human body. It's the vehicle you are traveling in through life.
Okay, the body.
The horses pulling the chariot represent your sense organs, your eyes, your ears, your sense of taste, your sense of touch.
The things that constantly pull us toward the world.
Exactly. And the road those horses are running on represents the objects of sense pleasure, the things in the world you want to look at, the food you want to eat, the material goods you want to acquire.
Right.
Now, to control those horses, you have the reins. The reins represent your mind. The charioteer, the one who is supposed to be holding those reins firmly, represents your intellect, specifically your highest, most discriminatory wisdom.
The part of you that knows what's actually good for you.
Yes. And finally, the passenger sitting in the back of the chariot, the one being taken for the ride, is your individual soul.
This is such a profound way to understand our own anxiety and bad decisions. Think about what happens in a normal, unexamined life. The horses, our senses, see something they want on the road. Let's go back to the chocolate chip cookie. Or let's say it's an opportunity to lash out at someone in anger.
The horses want to run toward it.
If the reins, the mind are weak, and if the charioteer, the intellect, is asleep at the wheel, what happens?
The horses run wild. They drag the chariot right off a cliff. Your senses hijack your entire life. You eat the thing you shouldn't eat. You send the angry email you shouldn't send. You buy the thing you can't afford.
And the passenger, your soul, is just tossed around helplessly in the back, experiencing massive anxiety, fear, and suffering. You feel out of control because, fundamentally, the wrong part of you is driving the vehicle.
The goal of the Gita, then, is to teach you how to wake up the charioteer. It is teaching you how to hand the reins of your mind over to your supreme intellect, to your highest wisdom, so that your horses are controlled and your chariot moves smoothly toward its true destination, which is that lasting peace, that moksha.
Handing over those reins requires a massive shift in values. And the sources highlight this with a brilliant backstory about the two cousins, Arjuna and Duryodhana, and how they made their choices before the war even began.
It's a story about what we prioritize when we are in crisis.
I love this story. It takes place just before the battle lines are drawn. Both cousins know the war is inevitable, and both know they desperately need the help of Krishna, who, in addition to being a divine figure, is a powerful king with a massive army.
Right.
So they both travel to Krishna's palace to ask for his alliance. They happen to arrive on the same afternoon at the exact same time, and it turns out Krishna is taking an afternoon nap in his bedroom.
The physical placement of the characters in this scene is everything. It tells you everything you need to know about their internal state. Duryodhana, the arrogant, entitled usurper, walks into the bedroom first.
And what does he do?
He sees Krishna sleeping, and he haughtily walks right up and sits on a lavish chair at the head of the bed, right next to Krishna's pillow. He demands the position of superiority. He is centered entirely on his own ego.
Then Arjuna walks in. He is the humble, rightful heir. He sees Krishna sleeping, and instead of demanding a seat of honor, he quietly sits down on the floor at Krishna's feet. He adopts a posture of absolute reverence and devotion.
When Krishna finally wakes up and opens his eyes, who does he naturally see first?
He sees the person sitting at his feet.
Yes, he sees Arjuna. Krishna welcomes them both and asks what they want. Duryodhana is immediately terrified. He thinks Arjuna was seen first. He is going to ask for Krishna's massive, invincible army, and I am going to lose.
But Arjuna doesn't ask for the army. He says, I just want you. I want your presence, your guidance.
And Krishna agrees, but he throws in a massive caveat. He says, I will be on your side, but I will not fight. I will not pick up a single weapon. I will just be your driver.
Hearing this, Duryodhana is ecstatic. He thinks Arjuna is an absolute blundering fool.
Exactly. When it's Duryodhana's turn to ask, he demands Krishna's entire military force, his wealth, his fully equipped armies. And Krishna freely gives it to him.
Let's take that a step further and look at the profound lesson here. When given the choice between God's external power, the armies, the wealth, the ability to violently manipulate the material world, and God's internal guidance, Duryodhana foolishly chooses the external.
He chooses the ultimate form of artha. He thinks he can solve his internal insecurity by accumulating more external force.
But Arjuna, facing the greatest crisis of his life, facing an army that vastly outnumbers his own, chooses the internal guidance. He chooses the divine intellect to drive his chariot. He knows that if the ultimate wisdom is steering the vehicle, the size of the enemy army doesn't matter.
It's the ultimate test. Do you want the tools to manipulate the world, or do you want the wisdom to navigate it?
We face this choice constantly. When we are struggling at work, do we ask for a new boss and a bigger budget, or do we ask for the patience and clarity to handle the pressure? Arjuna chose wisdom.
But, and this is where the text gets incredibly real, even with the divine wisdom literally driving his chariot, Arjuna is still human. And as we move forward into the narrative, we witness one of the most famous, visceral, psychological collapses in literary history. We're looking at the anatomy of paralysis.
The tension is unbearable. The two massive armies are lined up. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, elephants, chariots. To officially kick off the battle, the commanders blow their conch shells, which served as ancient battle bugles.
The sources describe the audio of this moment in great detail.
They really do. Duryodhana's army sounds their horns first. It's described as a disjointed, harsh, terrifying cacophony. Sri Sumatindra Tirtha's commentary points out that this harsh, unharmonized sound is symbolic of the fear, disunity, and inner turmoil within the evil army.
Even though they have the bigger force, they're fractured inside.
Exactly. In response, the Pandavas sound their massive synchronized conches. It is a unified, harmonious roar that the text says shattered the hearts of the enemy. It is the sound of absolute inner alignment.
Amidst this deafening roar, right as the arrows are about to fly, Arjuna makes a fateful request. He turns to his charioteer, Krishna, and says, "Drive my chariot into the no-man's land. Position me right in the middle, between the two armies. I want to look at the faces of the men I am about to kill."
Krishna complies. But Krishna, being the divine intellect, doesn't just park the chariot randomly. The text specifically notes that Krishna drives the chariot and stops it directly in front of two specific people in the enemy army, Bhishma and Drona.
This is a devastating detail.
Yeah.
Bhishma is Arjuna's beloved grandfather. He's the patriarch of the whole family, the man Arjuna sat on the lap of as a child. Drona is Arjuna's revered teacher, the master who taught him how to hold a bow.
They are fighting for the enemy side out of complex, unfortunate political obligations, but they are the people Arjuna loves and respects most in the world.
And seeing them standing there ready to die, it breaks him. It completely shatters his resolve. Arjuna looks around and realizes he doesn't see a faceless, evil enemy army. He sees uncles, cousins, nephews, friends, and teachers.
He suffers a total, catastrophic physical and mental collapse. The text describes symptoms that anyone who has ever had a severe panic attack will instantly, viscerally recognize.
Arjuna says, "My limbs are weakening. My mouth is drying up, my body is trembling, my hair is standing on end, my bow is slipping from my hand, my skin is burning.
He literally drops his weapons, his legs give out, and he sinks down into the seat of the chariot. He looks at Krishna and says, I will not fight.
This is where the Gita transitions from epic story into a profound psychological study. Because Arjuna doesn't just sit there and say, I'm scared. He does what all highly intelligent people do when they are terrified. He starts intellectualizing his fear.
He starts building a massive, seemingly flawless moral argument to justify his paralysis.
Yes, he turns to Krishna and says, even if I win the three worlds, it's an empty victory if I have to step over the corpses of my family to get it. What pleasure can we possibly find in a blood-soaked kingdom?
He goes even further. He starts arguing about kula dharma, or familial and societal traditions. He tells Krishna that if he destroys the family lineage in this war, the traditions of society will collapse, morals will decline, women will be corrupted, and the entire society will plunge into eternal sin.
He is essentially arguing that staying away from the war is the higher moral ground. He is saying, I am choosing peace. I am relinquishing my weapons out of nobility.
And to a casual observer, he sounds completely right. If a modern person heard this, they would say, wow, Arjuna is a pacifist. He's incredibly enlightened. He won't kill his grandfather for a piece of land.
But the commentaries reveal something entirely different. They tear this argument apart.
This raises an important question. Is Arjuna actually being noble here?
And the answer, from the perspective of the text and the deep psychological reality it portrays, is a resounding no. What Arjuna is experiencing is a state termed Vishada.
What does that mean?
Sri Madhvacharya's commentary defines Vishada as a specific kind of mental weakness caused by grief, which is born of delusion.
Why is it a delusion? He is literally looking at his grandfather.
It is a delusion because Arjuna is completely forgetting his actual duty, his dharma, in this specific context. In the societal structure of the time, his role as a warrior and a leader is not to conquer land out of greed. His solemn duty is to protect the innocent from vandals, from tyrants, from those the text calls attains.
What does that attain?
It refers to people who commit heinous crimes, arson, poisoning others, stealing land with weapons, and oppressing the weak.
The Kauravas, the enemy army, have committed all these crimes for years. They have tortured citizens and stripped women of their dignity.
Arjuna's absolute duty is to stop them and restore justice for the innocent people relying on him.
But he is abandoning his post.
He is abandoning the innocent not out of true pacifism, but out of a misplaced, selfish, emotional attachment to his own relatives. He simply doesn't want to feel the pain of personal loss. He is dressing up his cowardice and his emotional attachment in the beautiful robes of high philosophy and moral superiority.
Oh man, that is so confronting. If we bring that back to the listener, think about how often you do exactly that. How often do you mask your fear of doing the hard thing, the necessary thing, by pretending you are taking the moral high ground?
It happens all the time.
Think about a modern workplace. Oh, I'm not avoiding confronting my toxic boss because I'm terrified of conflict. I'm doing it because I believe in maintaining a peaceful, harmonious workplace.
Right.
Or think about creative pursuits. I'm not failing to launch this new project because I'm afraid of public failure. I'm just waiting for the perfect moment because I have incredibly high standards. We use our intellect to build these elaborate, bulletproof defense mechanisms to justify a paralysis. We are all Arjuna, sitting in the chariot, giving a TED talk on why we shouldn't have to do the hard work.
It is the ultimate self-deception. We use logic to serve our emotional avoidance. And what happens next is the turning point of the entire epic.
The question is, how does the divine intellect, how does Krishna respond to this elaborate, emotional, supposedly moral breakdown?
This is where Chapter 2 begins, and Krishna finally speaks.
This might be my favorite part of the entire deep dive. Arjuna has just poured his heart out, crying, trembling, making these grand philosophical arguments about peace and the decline of society. If this were a modern therapy session, you might expect Krishna to be super gentle.
You'd expect him to validate his feelings.
Right, tell him his trauma is real and maybe offer him some water and a breathing exercise.
But Krishna does none of that.
His very first words are essentially a slap to the face. He says, "What is wrong with you? Get up."
It is a profound shock to the system. The Sanskrit terms Krishna uses are piercing and deliberate. He calls Arjuna's behavior anarya justam, which means unmanly, petty, and unworthy of a noble person. He calls it klebium, faint-heartedness.
He essentially says, in this moment of terrible danger, when thousands of people are relying on you, how would you become infected by this pathetic weakness? It will not lead you to heaven, and it will destroy your reputation on earth.
Swami Sarvapriyananda makes a brilliant, humorous point here about that last part. He notes that Krishna warns Arjuna of akirtikaram, eternal ill repute.
He basically says, if you run away now, claiming you're a pacifist, no one will believe you. Your enemies will say you ran away out of cowardice. People in 21st century Manhattan will be making fun of you. Your name will be mud forever.
It sounds incredibly harsh, especially to modern ears. It sounds like a locker room pep talk from a ruthless old-school football coach. Shake it off, scorcher of foes.
But there is a very specific, deeply psychological reason Krishna takes this approach before he ever mentions a single word of deep philosophy, Vedanta, or the nature of the soul.
Why not start with the philosophy? Why not explain the nature of reality to calm him down?
Because Arjuna has not yet genuinely asked for help.
Exactly.
He is in pain, yes. He is crying, yes. But he is still convinced his own solution, dropping his weapons and running away into the forest to live as a beggar, is the right answer. He is still trying to adjust the external world to soothe his internal pain.
Krishna, representing the ultimate wisdom, knows that no teaching, no matter how profound, can enter a mind that is already full of its own answers.
This brings us to an incredible contrast presented in the sources between our two cousins, Duryodhana and Arjuna. It's a contrast that defines the threshold of spiritual awakening.
Let's look at Duryodhana first, because his psychology is terrifyingly relatable.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment before the war where Krishna actually tries to negotiate a final peace treaty.
He goes to Duryodhana and says, look, this war is evil. It will lead to the destruction of everything. Just give your cousins their small rightful share of the land and let's have peace.
Duryodhana's response is one of the most tragic things I've ever read. He says to Krishna, I know what is right, but I don't feel like doing it. I know what is wrong, but I can't stop myself.
He admits he is impelled by a dark inner force. He operates like an addict. He has total self-awareness of his own toxicity, but he has zero willingness to surrender or ask for help. He chooses to ride the chariot off the cliff with his eyes wide open.
Duryodhana represents the closed mind. He acknowledges his disease, but flatly refuses the medicine. Arjuna, however, reaches a completely different state.
After Krishna hits him with that tough love, telling him to shake off his petty weakness, Arjuna's intellectual defenses finally crack.
He realizes his grand arguments about society and peace are just rationalizations for his fear. He realizes his plan to run away won't actually stop his suffering, because he will carry his guilt and his divided mind with him into the forest.
He reaches a state called karpanya, which translates to absolute, unadulterated helplessness. He hits rock bottom.
And in that moment, he turns to Krishna, not as a debater, not as an equal, but as a desperate student. He says, my mind is completely confused about my duty. I am your disciple. I surrender to you. Please tell me definitively what is good for me.
And then he asks the ultimate human question, the one Duryodhana was too proud to ask. Why do people do wrong things even when they don't want to? What forces us, and how can we change?
That is the moment. That is the crack where the light gets in. The text is revealing a truth here that applies to therapy, to mentorship, to coaching, and to spirituality. No external guide, no book, no guru, no therapist can help you until you take that painful first step, admit your own solutions are completely failing, and actually ask for help.
You have to empty your cup before it can be filled.
And Krishna's demand in verse 2.3, the demand to stand up and take action, is central to breaking the cycle of paralysis. Swami Vivekananda considered this specific verse the most important verse in the entire Gita. It's the demand to break the physical and mental freeze response.
So what does this all mean for us, sitting in our own moments of paralysis? Swami Sarvapriyananda shares this incredibly funny, relatable anecdote from his time in the monastery to illustrate how we break the freeze.
The alarm clock story.
Yes. He talks about how the monks had to wake up at 3:30 in the morning for meditation. He describes how easy it is to lie in bed, agonizing, debating with yourself. The alarm goes off and the mind starts negotiating. Should I get up? I'm so tired. Maybe just 5 more minutes. I have a slight headache. My back hurts. Meditation is a lifelong practice. One day won't matter.
The mind spins in endless circles of intellectualized avoidance.
He mentions a novice monk who realized his mind was his own worst enemy in the morning. So instead of using a normal alarm clock right next to his head, he took the clock and placed it at the very foot of his bed. When it went off at 3:30, he couldn't just reach out and lazily hit snooze.
He physically had to sit up engage his core muscles, and reach forward to turn it off. By the time he was physically sitting upright, the mental paralysis was broken.
He even jokes about those modern alarm clocks that have wheels and roll off your nightstand and hide under your bed, making you literally chase them around the room in the dark.
The point is not the clock. The point is the action. Do not lie in bed debating your life. Do not sit in the chariot intellectualizing your fear.
Jump out of bed, pick up the bow. Take an action, however small. Action shatters the illusion of paralysis.
It is the prerequisite for all transformation. If you decide, I am going to change my reality, even slightly, I am going to stand up, you have moved from Duryodhana's camp of doomed acceptance into Arjuna's camp of seeking.
Only when Arjuna says, I surrender, tell me what to do, and physically prepares to listen, does Krishna actually begin to teach the profound philosophy of Vedanta. Only then does he explain the immortal nature of the soul, the paths of knowledge, action, and meditation. But it all starts with the refusal to remain paralyzed.
We've covered an unbelievable amount of ground today. Let's briefly recap this journey we've been on.
We started by realizing that our endless pursuit of external happiness, the cookies of kama, the promotions of artha, the transactional morality of dharma will never be enough to cure our suffering. We have to look inward for true liberation, for moksha.
We then looked at the terrifying battlefield of our own minds, where our angelic and demonic forces are constantly clashing. We saw how easily our senses can hijack the chariot of our body if our intellect isn't holding the reins.
We watched Arjuna suffer a total breakdown, masking his fear of doing the hard thing behind seemingly noble moral arguments.
And finally, we saw the turning point, the moment of Karpanya, total helplessness, where Arjuna drops his ego, stops making excuses, and asks for guidance.
We learned that the Gita isn't about fighting an external war against an invading army. It's about gaining the absolute clarity and courage to fight the internal war. It's about aligning your senses, your mind, and your intellect so you can finally move forward.
The beauty of this text is that it meets us exactly where we are, confused, anxious, and sitting in the middle of our own personal battlefields. It asks nothing of us initially except honesty.
The honesty to admit that our current strategies for finding peace are not working, and the courage to ask a deeper part of ourselves for the way forward.
It is so incredibly powerful.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you, the listener, with one final, provocative thought to mull over on your own. Something that builds on everything we've discussed today.
We talked a lot about how Arjuna was terrified of destroying his family to win the kingdom. He looked across the battlefield and saw his beloved grandfather, his teachers, his cousins. He couldn't bear the thought of eliminating them.
But if, as the texts say, this entire battlefield is entirely internal, if this is all happening inside your own mind, who is the family you are so terrified of destroying?
What if the beloved relatives standing in the way of your ultimate liberation aren't people at all?
What if they are your own outdated identities? What if your grandfather Bhishma represents your comfortable, deeply ingrained bad habits that you've lived with for decades? What if your teacher Drona represents the ego-driven narratives you've nurtured since childhood, the stories that tell you who you are and why you can't change?
To win the kingdom of true inner peace, you might have to engage in a civil war against yourself. You might have to let those old, beloved, familiar versions of yourself fall.
Are you willing to draw your bow against the parts of you that are holding you back? That is the ultimate question.
It really is.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this message was helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us and helps us continue creating content like this. And if you believe this message could help someone you know, please don't forget to share it with them. We'd also really appreciate your honest feedback. And what should we improve for future videos? In the comments, tell us. Thank you again for being here. We'll see you in the next one.